As someone who's pretty much played Fortnite since Chapter 1, what do I think of the game in its current state? Well, it's terrible. To me, Fortnite's been on a slight decline for some time now. Maybe the game occasionally redeemed itself a bit here and there, but generally it's still a downward trend. Whatever your thoughts are on previous chapters, I hope we can all find some common ground here and agree there has never been a worse era of Fortnite than Chapter 5. There are many things I disliked about this chapter, but before I go through everything, let's briefly go back in time. Chapter 4 comes out and I'm pretty content. It felt like a good reset and nothing too crazy was going on. Unfortunately, everything got out of hand by the end. I did not like the direction the game had gone in. Enter the OG season and the game's good once again. This mini-season was a much-needed palate cleanser. It was a return to a simpler time, and I could only hope Epic Games would understand this is why the player count was so high that month. It wasn't solely nostalgia, people just enjoyed when Fortnite was simpler. Clearly, they didn't get the memo.
Shield slide! Shield slide! Shield slide!
And then I die! Are you waving at? Hit him! What are you waving at?
Chapter 2 Season 2 of Fortnite saw the introduction of bosses. These were hostile NPCs you could find on the map, and killing them would net you their signature weapons, which were of the mythic rarity. They've been a staple of the game since, with every single subsequent season of Battle Royale having their own set of bosses. I've always been generally indifferent when it comes to this aspect of the game, because bosses are pretty harmless in this game's ecosystem. You'd think the mythic weapons would be crazy overpowered because of their better than legendary status and them only being attainable through killing a beefy NPC, but that wasn't really the case. A game never felt unwinnable if someone other than me had a particular mythic. I also never felt much better off if I had one myself. That being said, screw TNTina's bow. That's the only mythic that put the wielder at a disadvantage. I gave that thing a chance back in the day and got second place once because I couldn't land a single shot on the last guy. Never again. Anyway, there were a couple mythics I dreaded being on the receiving end of, but they weren't boss drops, so they're immaterial to this discussion. Now that you know how I feel about bosses, it may or may not be surprising my opinion of them kind of flipped in Chapter 5. These guys were no longer some silly NPCs you could get a semi-remarkable weapon from. No, on top of their mythics, they dropped medallions, which, in my opinion, were a bad addition to the game, and unfortunately, they were a gimmick for the entire chapter. Medallions were items that gave you certain perks when held, with the benefit of not taking up inventory slots, but detriment of your general location being given away by a circle on the map. The more medallions a player had, the smaller that circle became. In Chapter 5 Season 1, there were a total of 5 medallions, which all granted passive shield regeneration. Now you probably see why I'm averse to them. You know how useful that is? Shield is such an integral part of the game loop. It grants more overall health, allowing you to soak more hits. There are many ways to replenish the meter for it, from minis, big shields to splashes. Sure, you may have topped off your shields early, but you're not going to be untouched the entire match, so at least one of your precious inventory slots is going to be populated by some kind of healing item. Probably for shields, since it's the first layer of health to go in a fight. It's a sacrifice you have to make. Consuming stuff like minis and big shields also left you pretty vulnerable, so you always had to find the right time to pop them. With these new medallion items, you didn't really have to worry about that stuff anymore. These things healed you automatically, with the added benefits of not taking up inventory slots and replenishing more the more you collected. If you're in a stalemate trading fire with an opponent who has a medallion, you, the sucker, have to waste valuable shield consumables every time you're dinked, while the opponent just has to hide from you and wait for their passive shield regeneration to take effect. If you managed to take a bunch of their shield off and felt comfortable enough to get close to finish the job, the medallion user probably had a failsafe in the form of movement to quickly get away from you. As they're running away, their shield is being replenished in the background. It was even worse in build mode. Now if you finally landed a massive shot on that one nerd in your game that went for the medallions, they're not going to be vulnerable enough to quickly box up and pop minis while you hack away at their cover. No, they're just going to keep cranking and running away till the medallion finishes healing them. Then they'll suddenly have the courage to fight you again. Don't even give me any of that, "Oh, but they eventually nerfed the medallions by slowing the rate of regeneration." So, that didn't matter. The perk was still highly sought after and continued to be incredibly useful. The wielders just had to build more or hide a little longer. Also, the caveat of having your general location given away is mostly a non-issue. Even Epic Games knew this because they made those circles even smaller only 1 week into the chapter's launch, hoping to better balance the risk versus reward. If you had all 5 medallions, the circle was pretty much a dot on the map. There was no hiding for you. All of China knew where you were, but if you were good enough to get them all, you likely didn't care. You probably welcomed any suckers unaware they'd be running to their deaths. Marking the wielder just wasn't a big enough caveat when the perk was significant passive shield regeneration. Remember the getaway LTM from Season 5? To win in this mode, you had to carry a llama jewel to a floating van. When held, the llama replenished health and shields over time. However, it slowed down your movement speed and took up an inventory slot. Those are caveats, okay? Not some stupid circle on the map that slightly gives one's position away. Man, I remember playing a duos game where my friend and I managed to kill another team that had all 5 medallions. They practically hand-delivered them to us. Sorry guys, guess you weren't as good as you thought you were. I know you had the gritty automatically highlighted on your emote wheel ready to fire if you beat us. Better luck next time. That doesn't add much to the discussion, but I just felt like mentioning it because screw these kinds of players. Chapter 5 Season 1's medallions pretty much eliminated an integral part of the game for the select few that had them. No longer needing to worry much about shields was an incredible convenience. In short, these items were obnoxiously advantageous, highly sought after, and added a sort of hyper-competitiveness to the game I wasn't a huge fan of. Now, that last point sounds a bit weak, and maybe it is, but I guess I'll try to explain it. I don't really like how sweaty the medallions made people in lobbies. Now many are thinking, oh my god, I gotta get that shiny thing on the map. I'd be stupid not to. It's too useful to pass up. If I get it, I'm way more likely to win. Sure, those same people likely had a similar mindset in previous chapters, but as mentioned before, the mythic weapons the old bosses dropped were not a big deal. Someone who went to the Shark and got Sky's Scar wasn't that much better off than someone who picked up a blue AR at Holly Hedges. However, someone who went to Lavish Lair and got Oscar's medallion was instantly better off than someone who went to Classy Courts because there wasn't an equivalent item at that location. It also created a sort of positive feedback loop. A player gets a shield medallion and is instantly at an advantage. They're marked on the map, bringing more players closer together since they all want a chance at the medallion. Many die as a result, speeding up a match's progress, and that medallion user likely survives due to the perk making them harder to take down. More and more die through similar means, including other medallion players, meaning one player will likely get more medallions. This process repeats until pretty much all medallions are collected, and one player becomes a shoo-in for the victory because they will have far less adversity due to lack of competition. Of course, not every game ended with some invincible player who had all medallions, but I think it's safe to say there were at least a few people in every lobby who sought to go for as many of them as possible. They increased your chances of winning, wanting them was only natural, but I just wasn't a fan of the added temptations. In the early seasons of Fortnite, I liked how everyone was equal on the battlefield. It didn't matter where you landed, nor what weapons you picked up. Everyone pretty much had an equal chance of survival. No one player ever really had a significant advantage over another. The only thing determining your success was a mix of skill and luck. Now with medallions on the map, you're disrupting that balanced ecosystem, and I didn't like that. What were the earliest equivalents to medallions in Fortnite? The Infinity Blade from Season 7 and the Brutes from Season X.
What?
The Infinity Blade was so controversial, it was only in Battle Royale for 3 days. No one was a fan of the mechs. They persisted pretty much the entire season, but no amount of nerfing made them more tolerable. Now, these are obviously extreme examples, but it's not the most ludicrous comparison, as they were indeed additions to the game that similarly tempted players when available and granted a huge advantage, subsequently disrupting the game's ecosystem. The medallions are the same in that sense. It does sound like I hated all medallions as a whole, but that's not really true. Would I prefer they have never been added to the game to begin with? Sure. However, the concept of an item on the map that grants a unique benefit while making the wielder a bigger target isn't inherently bad. You just have to make sure the benefit isn't ridiculously advantageous, which, as you now know, was not the case at all for Season 1. This initial iteration of medallions left a terrible first impression, and had me dreading what they do with this gimmick for the subsequent seasons. Honestly, I think if no one spoke up about how annoying these were, Epic Games would have likely taken the lazy route and made all medallions for the rest of the chapter just replenish shield. Luckily, the medallions from the remaining seasons were generally better since their perks were pretty situational, which is ultimately how they all should have been. A Siphon medallion? That's fine, it's not a huge advantage. All Siphon does is grant you some health and shield after killing someone. It's really only useful if you survived a fight in which you lost health. In that scenario, you don't have to waste too many of the heals you were likely carrying, nor fall victim to a third party who was waiting for you to be vulnerable. That is what I mean by situational. An extra weapon damage medallion? Sure. Going from 30 damage with my AR to 31 doesn't do much unless my opponent really can't take those extra ticks of damage, which is unlikely. Again, situational. An infinite ammo medallion? Perfect. Unless you're stupid, it's really rare to run out of ammunition, especially late game. 400 AR ammo versus infinite AR ammo is not as one-sided as it seems. A regenerate shield medallion? Hell no! Too useful! You may as well throw in a no reload needed medallion, or something else equally advantageous. Along with Hades' Siphon and Ares' damage buff medallions, Season 2 also had one for the Cerberus and Zeus bosses. Cerberus' was by far the most useful of the four. It gave you infinite 0-point dashes, but you had to wait for the little green skulls to replenish, so it wasn't overpowered. It was a good and fair perk. Zeus' medallion gave you faster sprint speed and a higher jump while negating fall damage. I wasn't a fan of the jump, so I eventually began passing it up if I ever came across it. Along with the Machinist's Lazy Shield Medallion and Scar's Infinite Ammo one, we also had Megalodon's Infinite Nitro Medallion. This was my favorite of the season. Under Nitro, you had Infinite Sprint, didn't take fall damage, could run on water, destroy structures by simply running into them, ram into people, reload your weapons faster, and, best of all, had a greatly increased sprint jump distance. It's all pretty good stuff. Nitro made you a movement god. People initially really hated how much damage ramming did to both players and structures, so those aspects of Nitro eventually got nerfed, meaning the medallion also suffered. But I never saw Nitro as a means of offense, so those changes did not matter to me. Whenever I was up against it, I never felt at a disadvantage because, although it did a lot, Nitro was never something annoying to deal with. You could also carry a lot of Nitro splashes for the same buffs, and there were things like the boost rings and Nitro tanks around the map. Overall, solid medallion. The Machinist's was the only dud that season. We already covered Doom's Siphon Medallion for Season 4. Mysterio was another boss on the map then, and his medallion made the user invisible for a time when crouching. Of all the medallions this chapter, this was the most useless. Fortnite's played around with near invisibility a few times before, and it was never good. You can't do anything crazy like attacking while invisible, and sneaking up on people is difficult because canceling the invisibility leaves you vulnerable for way too long. Unlike previous iterations though, Mysterio's invisibility was actually pretty hard to spot. In this clip here, I see the last guy in our game hiding behind a rock. I'm relaying this to my teammates, and when they go check, they're like, I don't see him, dude. What are you talking about? I catch up to them and also have no clue where the guy went, but for like a split second, my gun's crosshair turned red on seemingly nothing. I honestly thought the dude was hacking and clipping under the ground, but then he revealed himself. That was pretty funny. We definitely got juked hard. The medallion still sucked though. The guy instantly died after getting caught. Emma Frost dropped a medallion that marked nearby opponents. This one kind of fell into the obnoxious category. Marking others is an incredibly useful mechanic. Hell, Storm Mark was one of my favorite augments in Chapter 4. If you can mark everyone nearby every minute or so, what the hell is that circle on the map even doing? What kind of perk manages to cancel out its caveat? I never saw this interaction, but I could only assume Emma Frost's medallion completely hard-countered Mysterio's. If his medallion was all about stealth and you got marked, then being invisible is worthless. It's crazy how they made a medallion that not only negated its own downside, but entirely undermined the effect of another. I really wanted to skip it, but I guess I have to mention the birthday medallion so no one goes, but what about the other medallion from Season 4 no one cared about? Yeah, it was Fortnite's birthday during Season 4, and you could find a special medallion from Presents. They didn't reveal your location on the map, and more than one could be found in a game. All it did was continuously give you balloons like the Party Time augment from Chapter 4. It's dumb, it's goofy, I never used it. In retrospect, medallions weren't as awful as I initially made them out to be. Many of them were pretty harmless, and only some were a little too good. As long as the good medallions had some sort of lesser equivalent other players could use, they wouldn't have been that bad. I mean, Zeus's medallion wasn't overpowered, far from it, but they added the Banana of the Gods consumable that season, which temporarily gave you the same effects. Cerberus's medallion was great, but players could get those skull dashes without it by touching the Styx water around the underworld location. During the birthday week in Season 4, the flare gun was unvaulted, and that weapon is capable of revealing nearby opponents when fired. That was great because now players who didn't have the Emma Frost medallion weren't at a disadvantage. It evened the playing field. Now everyone else could potentially mark nearby opponents. However, it didn't completely overshadow the medallion because the flare gun had limited uses and took up an inventory slot. The only advantage it had was allowing the player to mark whenever they wanted, as opposed to waiting every minute for the medallion to ping. Both did the same thing, but had their own advantages. The medallion was still preferred, but it was nice having the other option. They should have done something like that for Season 1. They should have added a consumable that gave you passive shield regeneration just like the medallions. Let's say this hypothetical item gave you a shield reserve when consumed. Only when the player is below 50 shield will the reserve kick in and gradually heal you up to 50, just like one medallion would. The downside to having this consumable over a medallion would be that limited reserve eventually running out. You may have the same ability as a medallion user, but they will ultimately have the upper hand because their medallion infinitely replenishes. There's also the exclusive benefit of more medallions increasing the shield cap, so we could take our little consumable idea a step further by removing the limit on 50 shields and letting it go all the way to 100. That way it could be on par with a potential all-medallion user. It wouldn't be too strong, because no matter how little damage you manage to deal to the opponent, you're still screwing them over because they're involuntarily eating away at their reserve. It may be nice they got their shield back, but they probably wanted to save as much of that reserve as possible for later. Basically, automatically and passively being able to regenerate up to 100 shield is as much a benefit as it is a detriment, so it wouldn't be as overpowered as it initially seems. Regardless, this would need a lot of playtesting, something Epic Games doesn't do enough of. That's all I have to say for medallions. They could have been a decent mechanic, but it didn't help that Epic Games implemented them poorly in the first season. I don't think I'll ever get over how annoying they made the start of the chapter. Regardless of the fact they were never that bad again, I really hope medallions don't persist into Chapter 6. Come up with some other stupid gimmick for me to complain about. Weapon modding was this chapter's major selling point. Mods were to Chapter 5 like augments were to Chapter 4. If every chapter of Fortnite had a physical version, the Chapter 5 box would have moddable weapons on that bulleted list on the back. I think the developers kind of dropped the ball here though. For such a big addition to the game, the modding feature felt rather shoehorned in without much thought. Weapons found on the map, whether they were floor loot or from chests, would have random mods on them. The higher the rarity, the more mods they'd have. That's fine, I like that implementation, even if it meant I'd occasionally get something stupid like a scope on a shotgun. However, if you wanted any control over the mods your weapons had, you had to find a mod bench. Where were these mod benches in Season 1? I don't know what they were thinking, but Epic Games put them in vaults only accessible via the medallions. Why? Why give players who are already well off with the medallions an even greater advantage? Now, mods are not huge game changers, especially compared to an item that infinitely replenishes shields, but there were certain weapons that benefited from certain mods more than others, and if you had those weapons plus access to a vault, there was nothing really stopping you from making a pretty ideal loadout for yourself. So during Season 1, players that went after the medallions early game always had a better start than the rest of the lobby. Again, while not a huge game changer, the ability to mod weapons can grant an additional advantage depending on the circumstances. Now, you could have just waited till the medallion POI was fully looted and everyone left, which is a solid strategy, but it wasn't foolproof. Did you ever go to a place like Fencing Fields to mod your guns long after the medallion had been taken, only to realize whoever beat the boss never unlocked the vault? This happened to me and my squad more than once. Who does this? Were those medallion teams just clueless, or were they villains who didn't want anyone having access to the vault, including themselves? So yeah, waiting for the medallion vaults to open was not always reliable. Mod benches simply needed to be more plentiful so just about any player could have access to the chapter's new big feature. I just didn't like how jarring this all was. You go from every player having access to augments in Chapter 4 to only a select few being able to mod their weapons in Chapter 5. I make it seem like these medallion vaults were the only places one could find mod benches. This was not the case. Mod benches could actually be found in a few minor vaults scattered across the map, which were accessible via keycards from nearby NPCs. Such vaults were easier to access since no Peter Griffin medallion was there to attract a bunch of ravenous wannabe pros. However, the chance of mod benches spawning in these lesser vaults was extremely low. I'm talking maybe a 4% chance here because 10% seems way too high. I came across a non-medallion mod bench maybe 3 times the entirety of Season 1, and my friends and I dropped Ritzy Riviera and Hazy Hillside quite often. The benches in the medallion vaults were guaranteed to be there, so they were always better than these minor vaults. If you didn't have any luck accessing these vault benches, there was one more option, the floating island, which had a guaranteed mod bench on it. The thing about the island though is that it's rarely uncontested. There are always at least a few other people going to it, so there will be conflict. Now this is all starting to sound like I'm just scared and don't want to get into fights. That's not what I mean by any of this. What I'm trying to convey here is, why does the world have to be so against me when all I want to do is take this stupid red dot off my shotgun? Why do I have to risk dying for a guaranteed mod bench? Why do I have to suffer the extremely high likelihood of not getting a bench if I decided to take it easy? Again, I go back to augments. There was no adversity when activating them. The augments menu was just a button press away for every player in the match. Sure, you had to survive long enough to get them, but you didn't have to jump into a highly contested POI to kill a beefy boss for a key to unlock an augment, nor was there a chance of randomly not getting an augment. What they did in the remaining seasons of Chapter 5 was a much better choice. There were a number of decently spaced out bunkers around the map, which contained a lot of loot and gold, but most importantly, guaranteed mod benches. However, some of these bunkers would actually be chained up and inaccessible for the whole game. This was always a random selection. Not only that, the ones that did open only did so halfway into a match, so depending on the storm's path, the open bunkers may already be out of zone, which may or may not be worth tanking storm damage for. I like how it all works out. Now it's all dependent on where you landed, where the zone is mid-game, and which bunkers decide to open. No single mod bench location is truly guaranteed, and you can't get to them by being a sweat who managed to get the key. It's fairly luck-based, meaning everyone pretty much has an equal chance of getting to a mod bench. Personally, I still would have made them more accessible and abundant. Why couldn't they have just put a mod bench in every POI plus some extras in smaller non-named locations with them all being available from the start? With such tweaks, access to weapon modding would no longer be solely based on luck or skill. You could just go wherever you wanted knowing there would be a place to mod your stuff nearby. Like I said a couple times already, mods aren't entirely game changers, so I really fail to understand why such a feature was so restricted all throughout the chapter. With this impassioned rant about mod benches out of the way, I have to admit mods felt kind of irrelevant after Season 1. I vividly remember suddenly not caring about modding my weapons anymore halfway through the chapter. Even if a bunker had opened near me during a match, I usually ignored it, and the prospect of getting gold bars and rarer loot honestly sounded better than being able to mod my weapons. I thought about why I abruptly stopped caring, and then it hit me. Around the same time, Fortnite vaulted the one weapon that benefited most from modding, the Reaper sniper rifle. What are the caveats of a heavy-hitting sniper? Slow ADS time, low magazine size, and, since Chapter 4, glare that gives you away when aiming. What's great is that there were now corresponding mods to address all these problems. Slow ADS time? Use the angled foregrip. Low mag size? Use the drum mag. Glare? Use an optic that isn't the sniper scope. I personally always went with the hollow sight. I always felt the need to mod this weapon if I ever got it. At the start of Chapter 5, there were guaranteed sniper spawns in the medallion vaults via those weapon cases. So, if you did get an overpowered medallion, you not only got a free sniper, but immediate access to putting the best mods on it. That's some of that additional advantage I alluded to earlier. While there were some other guns that worked well with certain mods, the removal of the sniper killed much of my desire to seek mod benches. I think it was ultimately for the best because it allowed me to get used to working with the random mods on guns I picked up. I use working with pretty loosely there though, because really, many of the mods on these weapons were borderline useless. But I did just say some mods were good with some guns, so I'll just get those out of the way right now before I go on. Any gun with a fast fire rate can benefit from the vertical foregrip and muzzle brake, as both reduce recoil. However, I believe guns like the Striker, Warforged, and Combat ARs benefited the most. These mods made mid to long range shooting much more tolerable, especially if the guns also had scopes. The Thunderburst SMG was consistently one of the best weapons in the loot pool. What made this weapon even better was the laser sight mod, which reduced bloom when hip firing. It's just supposed to be a slight accuracy increase, but putting this mod on the burst completely negated bloom, and no other gun drew such benefit. It honestly felt like a glitch, but it never changed, so I guess it was intentional. The Huntress DMR. This thing was unusable if it didn't have a scope on it, so any optic mod made it infinitely better. The Gatekeeper Shotgun. 3 shots per mag is not a lot. Hell, that's how many shots the Reaper Sniper had. Slap a drum mag on that thing, and you have yourself the best shotgun of the chapter that wasn't the Frenzy Auto. That's honestly it. Am I saying those are the only good weapon mod combos? No, those are just the ones I found most significant. If someone's doing the pistol only challenge in Fortnite, they probably would benefit from fully modding the pistol. The Reaper Sniper was eventually vaulted, so was the Burst SMG and Huntress DMR. Without enough weapons in the loot pool that can really benefit from specific mods, you're left with a feature that simply exists without providing like you expect it to. You could take out like half the mods in this game, and nothing would change. Many of them provide such minor perks that they're pretty pointless. Take the Speed Grip for example. Increased movement speed while ADSing? Who the hell cares about that? Why would anyone put this on an AR when reduced recoil is a much more useful option? Who goes down to a mod bench and voluntarily puts this on their guns? This thing only saw use when it was a predetermined mod on guns found on the floor, and even then, you wouldn't even realize it was attached. The suppressor. We've had a few suppressed weapons in this game over the years, and I don't believe anyone actually used them for their silencing feature. Sure, it may be a little harder to figure out where you were shot from if the opponent uses suppressed guns since the shots are quieter and aren't marked on the compass, but overall, I personally think suppressors are unnecessary in this game. Now in Chapter 5 you're giving me the option to voluntarily put one on my weapons? No thanks, that'd be a waste of 75 gold. If you're using an AR, SMG, or even the pistol, the muzzle brake is always the better choice. I mentioned how the Thunderburst had 100% hipfire accuracy with the laser sight, but what was this mod like on other weapons? Unlike reduced recoil or faster reload speed, which you can clearly see and or feel during gameplay, a slight increase in accuracy is much less apparent. So, I hopped on a creative map for some side-by-side comparisons. Notice the crosshair not widening as much on guns with laser sights. That's not the case for the AUG though. The crosshair actually got bigger. I'm not mixing the two clips up. You can clearly see the laser sight on the AUG. Am I missing something here? Did I actually make this gun worse by putting a laser sight on it? This honestly sucks. Yeah, bloom is clearly reduced, save for the AUG I guess, but it's just not significant enough. The fact that I had to juxtapose clips in a video editor to even see the difference is bad. If the change isn't apparent enough to players during gameplay, why have it at all? This thing was definitely not worth the 75 gold unless it was being put on the Thunderburst. If I pick up a weapon with a thermal scope, it's not a huge deal and I will make use of it, but I never went to a mod bench with the desire to put this thing on any of my weapons. Recall my earlier statement on recoil reducing mods, how they're really useful on guns with high fire rates. Who in their right mind is going to be putting either of these on a sniper or huntress DMR? Shotguns are the worst when it comes to modding. Other than the gatekeeper needing the drum mag, they don't need mods at all. Why would a shotgun need a suppressor? Why would a shotgun need a muzzle brake? Why would a shotgun need a scope of any kind? These mods add nothing to this weapon type. Underbarrel mods like the 3 grips are also not very beneficial. Why would a pump need reduced recoil? Why would faster aiming matter here? What kind of advantage does slightly faster movement speed while aiming even give? These mods are simply pointless because you rarely need to aim down sights with shotguns to begin with. You'd think the laser sight would provide some benefit then, but this very slight shrinkage of the hipfire spread is going to do basically nothing. Here's a little exercise for you. Show me where in this clip the 2 mods on my shotgun actually helped. What did that muzzle brake do? How did the speed grip help? This sequence of events would have played out exactly the same if the shotgun didn't have mods at all. Overall, not all mods complement all guns equally, and I'm not saying they should. It doesn't change the fact that some mods were significantly more useful on certain guns though, and that really accentuated how not so beneficial the rest of the mods truly were. In the end, the mechanic felt rather undercooked. Honestly, this was an inevitability. Really, what kooky effects could they have come up with to grant us more mods? Look how there were only 2 magazines the entirety of the chapter. One that speeds up reloading, and another that carries more bullets. What else could they have added? What other really minor perk that affects only magazines could they have implemented into a new possible mod? I'm drawing a blank here because reload speed and bullet capacity are the only things you can really change without doing something drastic that breaks the realism of mods. For underbarrel mods, the chapter started out with the laser sight and the vertical and angled foregrips. Less bloom, less recoil, faster ADSing, that covers pretty much all aspects of weapon firing. What else could you possibly add? What about a grip that makes you walk slightly faster while aiming? Great idea! Boom! Speed grip! Now we have 4 underbarrel mods. I already threw shade at the speed grip earlier. It's hard not to exaggerate its uselessness, but I really can't be too harsh. Compared to the wide range of effects augments granted in Chapter 4, you don't have nearly the same creative freedom when it comes to modifying Fortnite's guns, so you can only alter really minor aspects of combat, like walk speed while aiming. God, I hate this stupid mod. Again, you could take out like half of the game's mods and nothing would change. What we had was merely an illusion of variety and choice. To summarize, not only was Epic Games incredibly stubborn with mod bench access and availability throughout the chapter, but the feature itself ended up being underwhelming, with very few mods truly aiding in gameplay. When enough time passed and the feature was no longer fresh, I was able to see how useless modding ultimately was. Medallions managed to be a more prevalent gimmick. Season 3 of Chapter 5 was the car season. I could honestly just leave it at that and move on, because I'm pretty sure this was a universally hated season. A few days before Season 2 ended, a friend of mine who actually uses social media told me, according to leaks, the next season was going to have car mods. That's not good, I thought. Sounded like cars were going to be a big part of next season's combat. I don't want that. I don't want a drastic change to the game loop. Let us pick up guns and shoot each other without having to worry about anything else. I'll be honest though, it was super fun screwing people over the first week by messing around with all the new stuff. My friends and I won many games with those boss cars. After that though, the magic instantly dissipated. It got old. We just wanted the season to be over already. Cars became tiresome by the second week. Even after nerfing them over and over to mitigate the outrage, nothing changed. My friends and I just wanted to play the game normally, but we were still dealing with these people hurling infinite grenades and trying to run us over. Oh, but thanks Fortnite, now I can do a little more damage to these vehicles and solos, a mode only fools would play in a season this bad. One of the worst endgames I'd ever been in was during this season. I'm playing trios and it's down to a 3v3. The opposing team had the Megalodon boss car, and the zone had shrunk onto an open field with absolutely no cover. My friends suck, so they end up dying first, and it's down to a 1v3. I'm using nitro and shockwaves to create some distance so I can at least have some breathing room to maybe blow up the car with enough fire, but I can't get away because these people are boosting toward me at max speed with an infinite nitro boss car. The whole time I'm just constantly running away, exhausting all my movement options. I can't do anything because there's no cover to evade them on this barren part of the map. It's bad enough I can't get away, and it doesn't help when this SUV chasing me has someone in the passenger seat hurling a bunch of grenades in my general direction that never miss, with a launcher that never runs out of ammo. Even worse was the third teammate in the backseat spamming the minigun Epic Games threw into the game for some reason last minute. Of course I lost that game. What was I to do? I was up against this when all I had was this. I probably depicted that scene with some doodles because I did not save a recording of this event. Why would I? I don't want to unnecessarily infuriate myself by watching such a ridiculous display as I'm editing the video. I'm already angry just talking about it. If cars were so obnoxious you had to get rid of them in ranked, don't you think it was a bad addition to the game? Yeah, they knew. That's why we got Reload that season. You don't just come up with and create a new game mode like that in a week. Epic Games knew this season was going to suck well before they even dropped it. Man, Season 3 was only somewhat tolerable when they temporarily put boogie bombs in to counter the cars. OMG, but they were so overpowered! EMPs were a much more balanced counter. Nope, don't care. If you got boogied out of a car and insta-killed right after, you deserved it. You knew the consequences of getting into a car those 2 weeks, yet you still got in one. Then there were the car mods themselves. 3 categories, 2 mods each. The bumper mods were fine. The cowcatcher effortlessly destroyed structures, while the spiked bumper did more damage to players. No issues there. Bulletproof tires was the only wheel mod you needed. Off-road tires were useless since they could be easily popped with their larger hitboxes, and the whiplashes and SUVs were already made all-terrain vehicles for this season. They were nothing like the cars of Chapter 2. The illusion of variety struck yet again. The machine gun turret was crazy since it shot really fast and had little bloom, but it got nerfed pretty badly. It was borderline unusable by the end of the season. The grenade launcher was super annoying to deal with throughout because you barely had to aim. Just fire a bunch of explosives in the opponent's vicinity and they'd manage to hit. With such little variety, the whole running into crates thing to get mods felt so dumb, for lack of a better word. Cars should have just had predetermined mods, just like weapons. On the topic of vehicles, let's talk about the train because I won't be able to any other time. What a worthless addition to the game. Such a waste of memory. The train seemed neat the first week of the chapter, then instantly lost its charm after that. No one cared about this thing at all. No one was landing on it. It didn't matter if it had that fancy chest at the front. They had these stupid train-related quests like eliminate an opponent while on the train and deal damage while on the train. Those were the only quests of their respective weeks I didn't complete. I didn't care to do them at all. I wasn't going out of my way to go to the stupid train, and it seems like no one else was either because Epic Games quietly replaced those quests with simpler tasks like collect gold and stuff. Even they knew the train was dumb. The best thing about Season 3 was that they derailed that thing. All in all, cars made Season 3 unbearable, and no amount of tweaking to make them less annoying helped. While definitely unique, these vehicles and their new offensive capabilities simply took too much away from the game's standard combat. It was a foolish decision. To go from the fairly normal Chapter 5 Season 2 to this was way too jarring. I didn't complain about Nitro or the Nitro Fists here because I actually liked those additions. Nitro was great movement, and so were the Fists. Yeah, getting pummeled by the fists was a bit annoying, but I didn't run into that often. Regardless, any other possible annoyance or decent addition around that time was simply overshadowed by the cars. Remember the start of Chapter 3 Season 2, where building was disabled in Battle Royale for a week, then brought back alongside a separate zero build mode? That's what should have been done with these cars. Add them to the main modes for people to mess around with the first week, then relegate them to some other mode, like an LTM no one's going to play, for the rest of the season. Chapter 5 Season 3 sucked. The tanking player count then was a clear indicator of that. No way it could get any worse than this, I thought. Well, I was wrong. The last time we had a Marvel-based Fortnite season was Chapter 2 Season 4. I don't remember really hating it. Yeah, whatever, Marvel is lame, but the season was tolerable. This was not the case for Chapter 5 Season 4. The hero items were the problem. This Marvel junk just took too much away from the standard gunplay. They weren't all problematic though. Iron Man's boots didn't really have any offensive capabilities. The Black Panther claws were just a crappy melee weapon better used for movement. The War Machine arsenal could be overwhelming with the missile spam, but 80% of the stuff fired usually missed. While the Iron Man gauntlets did have aimbot, they didn't do much damage and overheated pretty quickly. The War Machine jetpack, on the other hand, was the single worst addition this season. It was so unbelievably overpowered, Epic Games had to vault it, 2 weeks before the season ended. Took them long enough? It was just so hard to hit jetpack abusers when they were constantly zigzagging around my shots like they were nothing. It was just so annoying to deal with. These people are flying circles around you, and they're untouchable. I want to stand still so Bloom isn't screwing me over while I try shooting them, but being still makes it easier for the opponent to hit me. I try to lead my shots, but their erratic zigzagging with the boost feature makes this near impossible to do. The auto turret only did like 20 damage, but it was overwhelming. The opponent didn't even have to look at you. They were guaranteed to get damage off as long as they were close enough and nothing was blocking them. Combo this with the jetpack and you were in for a bad time. Now they're flying around you and don't even have to try shooting you. Like, this guy here isn't even engaging. He's running away from me and I'm still getting hit because of his stupid turret. There were multiple occasions where my squad and I ran into teams that all had jetpacks and auto turrets. I'm talking every single member of these groups being fully kitted. It was near instant death every time. These guys just constantly zigzagged above us, and we couldn't lay a finger on them. Maybe they were a little disoriented constantly boosting around and their shots missed a bit, but their auto turrets compensated. How were these guys even finding that many turrets and jetpacks? The Captain America shield wasn't that bad alone. It just took way too long to stagger people guarding with it. It got nerfed eventually, but if the ballistic shield from Season 1 was annoying enough to get its health reduced to 150, why the hell was 500 the initial amount Captain America's shield had? That's 2 full health zero build players. It got halved, but 250 is still a lot. The bigger issue with the shield was its attack. You didn't have to aim. You just threw it and it homed in on the closest player. Obnoxious as hell. Pair this with the jetpack and you were unstoppable. Screw people who did this. Lachlan made a video with this combo and he dominated. He had to be in zero build of course, because this combo is irrelevant if you can simply place a wall in front of yourself to block the shield. This just goes to show Epic Games doesn't properly playtest. I ran into people using these items together way too often. There was this one really close squads game I had where it was down to a 1v1 and I lost because the last guy was doing the combo. There was literally nothing I could do. The loser kept dashing side to side a couple stories above me, throwing the shield with 100% accuracy, and none of my shots were able to connect. Oh my god. There was this other game where my friends and I ran into a complete psycho using the jetpack and shield. I think he had his sights set on the Doom medallion we picked up during the match and wasn't willing to leave without it. I didn't record my audio, but my friends saved it on their ends because they thought it was funny. So, here's the gameplay of me dealing with this freak, commentary synced.
He keeps jetpacking around and I keep losing sight of him.
This is so cringe, bro. This is so annoying, bro.
Bruh.
This is so cringe. This is so bad. This game fucks, bro. Oh my god, dude. Oh, what the
Do you have the medallion? That's why they're on.
It's so cringe. You are?
Other guys coming in.
He just, I hit him for 120 and he's running away. He's running away like a loser.
Oh,
How did you get way up there?
Oh, just die! Just die! You. Oh my god!
If you want to just witch's broom out to the front.
No, I want to kill this guy!
Just come over here, hop in my car, and we'll leave.
I'm coming towards you. This guy, bro! Worst chapter of Fortnite. Get out of here. They're coming in, bro.
I saw. They can't keep up with us. If you see any other cars as we're running, shoot the tires out.
Yep, he got into a van. And maybe slow down. Nope. Maybe slow down a little bit. He got out, he got out. He's in a car now, bro. Oh my god, this guy, he's... And I can't even shoot him, he's swerving around, god. Why is he going for this medallion? There are 2 other medallions he could have gone for. That's another car, that's not even him.
I won't let out.
I don't have any ammo left for this, bro. Please stop for a second.
Nope.
Please, you're not gonna get away from him. Are you kidding me? What are you doing? He's going into another car. This is not doing anything. He's running out of fuel. God,
But I'm a better driver.
look what you're doing. He's getting out. Do something. That's not just driving.
There you go, I healed you.
Let's go. You.
There's a guy.
Here, shut up! Shut up, let me have my moment! God, what a he was alone too! There were no other people with him, he died instantly! What is wrong with these people? Bro saw like a Cypher PK video with the stupid shield and the jetpack and was like, I gotta do this! I gotta win, it's an easy win!
Phew, almost lost my cool there. All in all, the hero weapons sucked. Some were broken, some were not, the ratio didn't matter. None of them should have been in the game to begin with. At least leave them for the lame LTM no one's going to play once everyone's gotten the free reward from completing the respective quests. Keep that junk away from Battle Royale. Look at my loadouts these games. I did not succumb to the degeneracy. I didn't want to use the stupid jetpack. I didn't want to use the stupid shield. I didn't want to use the stupid turret. I just wanted to play Fortnite. I just wanted to shoot people with guns, use an AR mid to long range, pump to SMG at close range, you know, standard gunplay. Why is this so hard to ask for? Why does Epic Games have to plague the loot pool with such stupid gimmicks? I didn't want to bring it up, but I kind of have to mention the Doom Island. In the latter half of the season, the loot island would spawn in as Doom Island on rare occasions, and capturing the point there would transform you into Dr. Doom, a near-invincible killing machine. If the Infinity Blade was bad, if the Brutes were bad, if the shield medallions were bad, then this Doom thing was even worse. 1,000 health, a super jump, a laser, full health siphon every kill, you weren't killing this guy unless they were stupid, or 5 other people were teaming up with you to take them down. Remember the Infinity Gauntlet in Chapter 1? How picking it up turned you into Thanos? 1,000 health, a super jump, a laser, full health siphon, it was the same thing. The only difference was that it was only available in an LTM. So, at least they were keeping a crazy powerful thing that pretty much guaranteed victory away from regular Battle Royale. The reason I didn't want to bring up this Doom thing was due to its rarity. It was pretty rare. One week though, I had a play session with some friends, and the Doom Island spawned every other match. We didn't win a single one of those games. Doom was simply impossible to take down. By the end of that session, my friends told me it didn't matter how rare a spawn it was overpowered regardless, and they were right. When you think about it, the rarity honestly made it even worse. They basically added gambling to the game with this. The Doom Island also spawned so late, you couldn't really prepare for it. Unless you constantly played like the island would spawn every game, but why would you want to live in constant fear like that? If it at least spawned at the start of a game, you could just be like, oh, no thanks, it's a Doom game, return to lobby. This whole Doom thing should have just been exclusive to the lame Heroes vs. Villains LTM. This next part isn't going to be as constructive, but I am so sick of Marvel, man. Can we just be done with them now? Did they really deserve a second season? Was the first one not enough? Were the tie-in comics no one actually read not enough? Were the several Marvel skins plaguing the item shop not enough? Look, the skins are whatever, even if it pissed me off to see 90% of players using them during this season. But can we not have an entire season dedicated to some third-party franchise? It wouldn't even matter if I actually liked Marvel. My sentiment does not change. I like Street Fighter and Avatar, but I don't actually want the characters from these franchises in Fortnite. I was never a big Marvel guy, and seeing how it's been reduced to slop nowadays thanks to Disney makes me glad I never became a true fan. Why does Marvel have to be so entwined with Fortnite anyway?
Money!
The only time I ever want to see Marvel in a video game is when it's versus Capcom, baby.
I wanna take you for a ride. I wanna take you for a ride.
This Marvel season sucked in every way imaginable, but at least it was just a season. Same with the car stuff from before. That all sucked, but it luckily only lasted one season. This next problem, on the other hand, unfortunately persisted the entire chapter. During Chapter 3, how did Epic Games solve the skill gap issue with the build mechanic? By getting rid of it entirely and adding a no-build mode. Aside from the fact that their map was not designed for no building at the time, it was a great decision in the long run. People who were getting sick of building migrated to zero build, some players who dropped the game in the past over building returned, and then there was the influx of new players joining because they no longer had to overcome the hurdle that was the super technical building mechanic. On top of all that, people who actually liked building still had their normal Battle Royale. Now that the big, scary building mechanic was no longer a concern, what else could possibly be discouraging potential new customers? Players with good aim. Bloom has been in the game since the start of Fortnite Battle Royale. I've mentioned it a few times already, but I'll actually explain what it is here. When you fire a weapon, the little pegs on the crosshair at the center of your screen expand. That's not just for show, it's an indication of where your bullets may go should you keep firing. Bullet paths are randomly determined within this area outlined by the crosshair. If you don't want your bullets going wherever they want, you need to keep the crosshair small so they're as focused as possible. That is what Bloom is. Yes, it's annoying, but it's there to prevent people from being too good. If two people are in a spray battle with ARs at medium range, it's impossible to tell who'll win. Even if one has better aim, it doesn't really matter because Bloom will ensure many of their shots will likely miss. The less skilled of the two has just as good a chance at being victorious. In this scenario, skill does not determine the outcome of the fight. Luck does. Bloom somewhat limited the abilities of better players, but what if that no longer mattered? What if, after 4 chapters of hit-scan weapons, everyone got used to Bloom? Maybe they were now patient enough to utilize first-shot accuracy. Now they could carefully chip away at someone who was 150 plus meters away by simply waiting for the crosshair to shrink before each shot. Maybe they took advantage of the many scoped ARs Epic Games introduced that not only had high fire rates, but didn't suffer from Bloom at all when aiming down sights. A meeting is called at Epic Games HQ. Mr. Epic Games himself is there and tells his staff, "I don't think getting rid of building was enough. How can we encourage even more people to play our game?" Mumbling quickly fills the room. The meeting doesn't seem to be going anywhere until, suddenly, "I've got it!" an employee bellowed, silencing the room. They continue. Snipers are fairly hard to use since the bullets are actual projectiles. Even pros don't land every shot. What if all guns were like this? Why don't we add bullet travel and bullet drop to ARs? And SMGs. "You're a genius," Mr. Epic Games exclaimed. "Now that girl over there that only plays Animal Crossing and Pokemon with absolutely no interest in our game can finally find comfort knowing everyone's aim will suck just as much as hers when we force her to play. Instead of letting her learn and grow like those before her did, we'll just bring everyone else down." There literally can't be any other reason for their decision. They saw how good many had gotten with aiming, realized it went against their policy of Fortnite needs to be a game for everyone, even for those who wouldn't play it, and made anything that could be used at mid to long range suck. This, without a doubt, was the worst thing about Chapter 5. Fortnite in 2024 would have been significantly more tolerable if the weapons were not projectile-based. Every gun that wasn't a sniper pre-Chapter 5 was referred to as hit-scan. This meant there was no actual projectile when firing your weapon. Pressing fire simply instantiated a ray, and the closest thing colliding with that ray that frame was hit. This was great. Is the dot of my crosshair on the dude when I pulled the trigger? Sweet, I hit them. No physics were involved. The only thing holding someone back was Bloom slightly altering the angle of these rays, ensuring you couldn't laser someone by spamming the weapon. The longer you held fire, the more the crosshair expanded, which made it harder to hit faraway targets. Unfortunately, pretty much every season of Fortnite starting from Chapter 3 had some kind of fast-shooting scoped weapon. ADSing with the scope nullifies Bloom, so the bullet ray is always perfectly aligned. Guns like these dominated the meta every season. It was a monster of Epic Games' own making. In Chapters 1 and 2, someone far away, whether on foot or midair, could only get hit a few times because you had to wait to minimize Bloom. And if you were spamming, the expanding crosshair ensured you similarly didn't get as many hits. Now with Chapters 3 and 4 having things like MKs, Striker Bursts, Red Eyes and Twin Mags, no one at any distance was safe. I believe this is the main scenario Epic Games wanted to mitigate. Sure, they could have just stopped adding these kinds of weapons to the loot pool, but mods were the next big thing. Every weapon in Chapter 5 could have a scope. Could you imagine getting killed midair 168 meters away by a green hit-scan pistol with a red dot? Something else had to be done, hence the bullet travel and bullet drop. These two small changes just made hitting targets so much harder. You have to aim some ways above because bullets drop. If a target is moving, you have to aim some ways ahead because the bullets actually travel. Your opponents aren't always going to be at the same distance from you. They're also not always going to be moving at a constant speed. Not to mention bullet speeds and drops vary for each weapon. There's just so much variability involved here, and it sucks. Even if you're timing and leading your shots well, they're still not guaranteed to hit because you can never fully predict where the opponent will be 0.075 seconds after you've pulled the trigger. You think someone's just going to travel in a predictable straight line after getting shot once or twice? No, they're going to sprint, jump, and/or strafe, forcing you to recalibrate. Sure, erratic movement has always been a sound strategy in avoiding gunfire, but this is much easier to do than this. Simply put, I can't really aim anymore, and I'm pretty sure everyone is in the same boat. This is just not something you can improve, unless you're some kind of god, because randomness is involved now more than ever. It's no longer just bloom, but the players you're shooting. I was looking through gameplay I saved from Chapter 4, and I had so many games with accuracies in the 40s, sometimes even higher. Chapter 5 though? I had some decent games, but I could barely reach the 30s most of the time. Like, 12%? What was I even doing that game? This fundamental change in weapons was so bad, the Reaper Sniper became my favorite weapon in the early half of Chapter 5. Me, a person who hated snipers all throughout Fortnite's history because I couldn't be bothered to lead my shots, could not survive a match without one now. I got more kills with snipers in Chapter 5 than I did in all previous chapters combined. I felt naked if I didn't have a sniper in my loadout. It was just so good! Why risk the chance of missing tons of shots at a distance, alerting your opponent, when you can possibly one-shot them from that same distance before they even know they're being looked at? How many times did they rework this gun? Making the bullet travel slower? Making it drop sooner? None of that mattered. This thing was always a beast, especially when properly modded. A scoped sniper doesn't have to worry about landing multiple shots in succession, it doesn't have to worry about bloom, recoil doesn't matter. Of course they eventually got rid of it. It's probably why they took away the Huntress DMR too. That thing was actually good. DMRs were historically garbage because everything else was hit scan when they were around. With every AR being a crummy projectile-based weapon, a DMR fit right in for once. But this was even better than the DMRs of old. Slow fire rate so you were incentivized to carefully lead your shots, and faster bullet travel and minimal bullet drop so you didn't have to do much math when aiming. Clearly, the gun was too easy to use compared to the other junk in the loot pool. It had to go too. God, I just miss hit scan so much! It was so satisfying to land shots in the previous chapters. Now it feels like every gun's barrel has the rigidity of a wet noodle. The weapons of Chapter 5 were awful, and Epic Games had the audacity to bring back perfectly fine old guns and make them projectile-based. Look what they did to my baby. I loved the AUG after Chapter 2 Season 2. High fire rate, tight spread, bursts reduced to 2 bullets from 3 so it was much more stable. It was such a good weapon. Better than the Scar in my opinion. Epic Games knew it was too good, so they ruined it by making it scoped in Chapter 3. I hated that change with a passion, but this is even worse. And you introduced it when the jetpacks dominated the game. I could barely hit anything with this stupid gun in Season 4. At the time of recording this, we're in the middle of the Chapter 2 remix season. They brought back the AUG the first week, but they still messed with it. They lowered the fire rate. We'll never see this gun return to its former glory. Rest in peace, purple and gold burst rifles. You'll be dearly missed. I finally got good at aiming, and Chapter 5 just took it away from me, all in an attempt to attract more players. You're trying to make it hard for better players to make it more inviting for the worse ones, but at the end of the day, your switch to projectile-based weapons will only make the worse ones suck even more, while the better ones eventually get used to it and revert back to being good again. And once we're back to the problem of a select few being too good at aiming, what the hell comes next? Wind currents around the map that affect the paths of your bullets, further complicating shooting? Just bring back hit scan for Chapter 6. Everyone will be happy. My friends suck at this game, but they're way more reliable and content when the guns are not projectile-based.
Playing this for just, what, like an hour so far? 30 minutes, if that?
Yep,
right?
and it's already better than Chapter 5.
Yeah, just bring back his scan, please.
Don't bring mods back, don't add any high fire rate scoped ARs, and everything will be fine. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll happen. I predict the main Battle Royale modes will never have hitscan dominate the loot pool ever again. Maybe we'll get junk like the Flintlock and lock-on pistol every once in a while, but you'll never see an OG Scar again. But hey, just play Reload! Just play Reload! It has hitscan! Just play Reload! Medallions sucked, weapons sucked, mods sucked, cars sucked, Marvel sucked, Fortnite Chapter 5 sucked. It was nothing but bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. Epic Games no longer understands its players. The switch from the OG season to this chapter proved that. Again, the OG season was good not because of the nostalgia, but because it was a return to a simpler time. A time where there weren't a bunch of gimmicks and unnecessary mechanics plaguing the game loop. A time where you didn't have to do calculus to shoot people. A time where there weren't constant collaborations with random IPs. A time where the game actually had an identity. A time where Epic Games genuinely cared for the quality of their product. Again, I'm recording this in the middle of Chapter 2 Remix right now, and while it's infinitely better than the entirety of Chapter 5, Epic Games still didn't get it right. Yes, hitscan weapons are back. The map isn't lame, there aren't any obnoxious gimmicks, but they screw it up with the inclusion of these stupid celebrities nobody actually cares about. A Chapter 2 OG that simply focused on its own characters would have been perfectly fine. Why does a moron like Eminem have to be at the grotto? They could have easily made a remixed Brutus skin, thrown it in the item shop because there wasn't any space for him in the battle pass, and made that the grotto boss. Why does Ice Spice have to replace Sky's spot on the map? You already have the Sky skin in the battle pass. Why not make her the boss on the map like Meowtis is currently? Speaking of Meowtis, they relegated the poor guy to the yacht so Snoop could be the center of attention at the agency. Oh, I'm sorry, the Dog Pound. It's depressing how they're making their own characters take a back seat for these fools. Man, they didn't even transition us into this mini-season well. Snoop Dogg and Ice Spice just showed up, sang some stupid song, and poof, we were in Chapter 2. Yeah, I know it was more involved than that, something to do with that rift beacon, but it's still lame. I thought Midas would return at the end of the Marvel season and be the reason we were sent back to Chapter 2. I thought he had been cooking something in the background after we saved him from the underworld back in Season 2. Nope, that would have made too much sense. Epic Games needed to come up with something stupider so they could include celebrity skins for shallow-brained folks to buy. This Chapter 2 remix feels so soulless. It just doesn't seem like there was any love put into this at all, especially when compared to Chapter 1 OG. Yes, the simplicity is there, but we also need originality, which I haven't explicitly brought up yet because I thought it'd be inherent. Yeah, whatever, Eminem was part of the end-of-season event for Chapter 1 OG, but at least he wasn't an NPC on the map. At least he wasn't a selling point of the season, being showcased in the gameplay trailers. Believe me, as the one and only TNTina enjoyer in the world, I'm so happy she finally got a new skin. But they took way too long, man. The game is in such a rough state now, I actually feel bad she got thrown in at a time like this. This whole video has exclusively been a rant about the state of Battle Royale, but I need to vent about everything else. Chapter 5 also sucked because it marked the end of Fortnite as a game. Now it's a platform. It's not just Battle Royale and creative anymore. No. Now we have a boring racing game. Now we have a Guitar Hero clone. Now we have a generic procedurally generated adventure game with Legos. We also have Fall Guys in this game now too. Just why? We don't need these stupid modes. They're not Fortnite. I hope to God they don't add any more during Chapter 6. They'll just die like the others are currently. What's that? No more seasonal updates for Rocket Racing? Oh my, it's like people stopped caring about that mode after they got the free skin from it and just wanted to go back to shooting people. What's that? The Festival Pass is now a music pass that can be progressed by just earning XP in any mode? And all festival quests now just grant XP instead of those useless festival points? Oh my! It's almost as if people didn't care enough to go out of their way to play a stupid Guitar Hero mode for some lame rewards in a game about shooting people. What's next? A Match 3 puzzle game mode? You'll attract maybe 12 grandmas who've never played Fortnite before, but that's not enough. You'll get a few existing players to try out the mode, but once they've gotten all the free rewards you've incentivized them with, they'll go right back to Battle Royale and never touch the new game mode again. It's not sustainable. Stop. Don't even add any new Battle Royale modes either. You've stretched the player base so thin already. Battle Royale, Zero Build Battle Royale, Ranked Battle Royale, Ranked Zero Build Battle Royale, Reload, Zero Build Reload, Ranked Reload, Ranked Zero Build Reload. Last year, some people were saying, hey, they should make OG Fortnite a permanent mode. No, that'd be stupid. We already have enough bots across our lobbies. We don't need yet another game mode that'll take away players from the others. We don't need a Chapter 1 OG Battle Royale and a Chapter 1 OG Zero Build Battle Royale, which will both inevitably get ranked versions. Epic Games rarely does LTMs anymore because there aren't enough players for them. Why should they make any more permanent Battle Royale modes if this is the case? Here's an idea. How about you just make the main Battle Royale mode actually good so you don't have to make so many different modes in an attempt to satiate every player? Can they also tone down the collaborations? Again, I hate how Snoop Dogg and these other fools have tainted what could have been a decent Chapter 2 OG. In the early days, we had stuff like the Thanos LTM and the Travis Scott concert. There was obviously more, but it doesn't matter. The number of collaborations forced down our throats this past year have more than likely outweighed those of the previous chapters combined. There's a new collaboration every frickin' week now, and with festivals sticking around, we're guaranteed a new out-of-touch loser every couple months. I just hate how this game's lost its identity. All these stupid modes and collaborations, it's too much. Oh my god, and their monetization has gotten so out of hand. Skins, emotes, pickaxes, those weren't enough, were they? Now they're selling Lego sets for their dumb Lego mode. Now you can buy instruments and copyrighted music for the dumb festival mode. Now vehicles are customizable. You can buy car skins, wheels, and particle trails. The item shop is just so unbelievably bloated. I haven't given it a genuine look in months. I really hate the car stuff in particular, man. I can't stand seeing a Whiplash transformed into something else. I joked with my friends a while back saying, what's next? Skins for mini shields that turn them into bottles of certain soda brands when picked up? Nope, shoes are next. I could rant about how they wasted a perfectly good slot in that Dynamo TNTina rewards section, but I'll restrain myself. We're just going to be putting shoes on our characters now? You're telling me the item shop and locker are going to be even more cluttered with a shoe section? This is ridiculous. It's beyond parody at this point. No, I don't want to put Air Jordan 1 High OG Black Toe reimagined shoes on my TNTina. Get that the hell away from me. If I notice you wearing kicks and I kill you, you're getting emoted on. You don't deserve the mercy of a mute player who quickly thirsts and goes on with their day. Guess I have a new addition to my list of reasons to emote on people in this game. Are we getting hats next? What about gloves? What about shirts? What about pants? Are we gonna have so much customization in the future that our skins themselves won't even be recognizable? Look at my locker. I don't have any jam tracks, I have the default instruments, I don't have an aura equipped, and I don't have any stupid car cosmetics on. I can't be the only one like this. I can't be the only one who hasn't sunken low enough to buy such worthless cosmetics. I'm utterly dumbfounded there's so much garbage in this game now. Fortnite has been borderline unrecognizable for months. Could any of this have been avoided? Is this just what happens when your live service game lasts 7 years? Why did the one silly multiplayer game I ended up actually liking and sticking with turn into this? Chapter 5, in my opinion, was a disaster. Not just in Battle Royale, but every other aspect of the game. Congratulations, Chapter 3. You can rest easy now knowing you're no longer the worst chapter of Fortnite so far. Chapter 6 is right around the corner. I don't know how it'll be, but I doubt it'll be a return to normalcy. I just want Fortnite to be Fortnite again, but that's a hard ask at this point.